Did you think owning a Porsche was instantly going to make you happy?
I did, and I've daily driven Porsches for over 5,000 days, and eventually have become content with my Porsche ownership. But boy, things didn't go as easy as I thought they would. I could have done things smarter and been happier while driving my Porsche 10 times as fast.
Here are 20 brutal truths about Porsche ownership I wish I knew a lot sooner.
Have you ever noticed that you feel like you are always chasing the next thing? When I got my first Porsche, I was excited, but it didn't take long until I started to daydream about the search for the next Porsche. This meant I wasn't finding joy when I drove the Porsche that was in my garage, and it sucked the fun out of driving. At least when I could drive it. But I'll get into that more later. Deciding to enjoy the Porsche you own makes better memories when it is time to move on to the next Porsche. Lesson 2. A while ago, I saw Jerry Seinfeld's Porsche 550 Spyder in person during Monterey Car Week. That was an extremely valuable Porsche that any Porsche enthusiast would love to own. The thing is, you can't really drive it, and if you do, you'll be worried the entire time that you'll wreck that pretty much irreplaceable sports car. On the other end of the spectrum, a cheap Porsche can be driven without this worry, and if you want to modify it, you aren't causing it to lose value. This just makes it more fun to drive. Lesson 3.
Have you ever noticed that none of your friends or family actually care that you own a Porsche?
When I got my first Porsche, I was very excited and couldn't stop talking about it. But the usual response was, "That's nice." Nobody cares that you have a Porsche, so just enjoy the experience for what it is. Lesson 4. For years, I avoided joining the Porsche Club of America. I was hesitant to pay the club fees because I didn't think I would attend enough events. But eventually, I did join. The club provided some great opportunities to enjoy my Porsche and meet some wonderful people. Attending Porsche Club events just made the ownership experience more fun. Plus, you get opportunities to drive your Porsche on the track. Lesson 5. Growing up, my family didn't make much money, and my mom was a cheapskate. While she would constantly buy lower priced items, as I grew, I realized that the cheapest products are not always the best value. This was further reinforced when I bought my first Porsche, a lowly 924, for just $200. It did run and drive, but needed a lot of work to restore it. As I got into the project, it quickly became evident that it would be cheaper to update to a good condition 944. So that's what I did. I wish I had learned a bit earlier that a cheap Porsche is often the most expensive Porsche you can buy. Lesson number 6. Before you purchase a Porsche, you may envision your ownership like this. In reality, it's usually more like this. That's the thing about Porsche. It isn't like a Lamborghini that is largely for show, but it's more about the driving experience. Lesson 7. Have you ever been on social media? Well, I guess technically you are right now. If you spend any time on automotive social media, you'll hear things putting down certain Porsche models. A few jerks on the internet will go out of their way to put down Boxsters or 944s or the 996 generation 911, just to name a few. Listening to this can cause you to either avoid or be unhappy with what is a fun car. So if you really want to enjoy Porsche ownership, then don't care what others say about a particular Porsche. Lesson 8. Do you remember when you were a kid and your mother would say, "Share your toys"? Well, now that you have bigger toys, you should still share. I've allowed others to drive my Porsches, and the smile on their face makes it worth it. Obviously, don't loan it to someone that wrecks everything they touch. But as long as they're a good driver, let them have a bit of the Porsche driving experience. Lesson 9. When I was a teenager, I would go to my uncle's house and help him work on his 1965 Ford Mustang. He had been a mechanic in the Air Force working on F-16, so I learned a lot from him. After working on the car, we would always take it for a drive. That was fun, especially after we swapped out that V6 and put in the V8. But he did end up getting plenty of speeding tickets in that car. Every time we would floor it, my smile would just grow a bit bigger. That's the type of experience I want to share with my kids, and is part of the reason I moved from a Boxster to a 911. The back seats, although small, allow me to take my kids for a drive every time we get a chance. Lesson number 10.
Before I ever bought my first Porsche, the owner of a mechanic shop tried to talk me out of ever buying a Porsche. He said I should just get a Corvette.
His reasoning was that maintenance was expensive, and something like an oil change for a Porsche Boxster would cost $500 at his shop. Now, even today, that is certainly on the higher end of oil change prices. But he tried to justify this price by saying Porsches are so much harder to work on that you have to use a professional. This did give me pause thinking about owning a Porsche, until I thought about the fact that he had a financial interest in this advice. Eventually, after doing plenty of research, I realized that I could just do my own maintenance and save a small fortune. Lesson 11. Do you remember when you were in school and you get stuck on a math problem? You had two choices. You could keep trying to figure out the problem or ask for help. In college, I did some math tutoring for other students. When someone would simply ask for help and get a tutor, their grades usually improved greatly. The same can be said for solving problems that arise on a Porsche. But cars don't come with tutors, right? This is why it's important to find a good online forum when you decide to buy a Porsche. Doing so can really help solve problems a lot quicker. I'm going to go ahead and put a few links to some good ones in the description. Lesson number 12. Have you ever had your significant other tell you something that doesn't make sense? It's like they expect you to read their mind and you just can't do it. Trying to troubleshoot a car problem can be the same. Even if you have a Porsche with a modern ECU, the information from a code scanner only gets you so far. That's why buying a code reader with Porsche software is important. It allows for better diagnostics and you can do things like reset the airbag light. Lesson number 13. When I owned my Porsche 944, the clutch went out. If you've ever changed a clutch on a 944, you know that it's a little bit of a tougher job due to the front engine, rear transaxle design. Being a more involved job, it's one of the few times that I've used a professional mechanic. I'm sure I could have done it myself, but not wanting to have the car down for as long as it would take for me to do the job, having a professional do it faster just made sense. It can save you a ton to do your own maintenance, but knowing when you should use a shop will make your life better. Lesson 14. Have you ever been scared out of buying a particular car because of a common issue? Quite a few people have avoided certain Porsches due to issues like the IMS bearing or head studs. The thing is, sometimes these issues can be overblown. Often people that profit from solutions feed off of your fears. Now, don't be unwise and make sure to do your research before a purchase. But don't spend all your time owning a Porsche worrying about what might break. Lesson 15.
When the uncle that I used to help work on cars with left for the Air Force, he left his Chevy Bel Air to his brother.
During this time, my other uncle drove it a ton of miles and never changed the oil. Funny thing is, engines don't do well with that. Eventually, the engine decided to eat itself. You're probably asking, what does this have to do with Porsche? Since the 90s, Porsche has had some long recommended oil change intervals that are at least every 10,000 miles. Now, an oil change is relatively cheap, especially if you do it yourself. By changing your oil more frequently than the recommended interval, it can help keep your Porsche on the road much longer. Lesson 16. I almost had my Porsche 944 burned to the ground. I had done some work on the clutch slave cylinder, and during the job, a wire above the clutch pedal got sliced. To fix it, I just spliced the wire and used some electrical tape. All went well for a few weeks and I forgot about it until it came loose while driving and the wire touched the clutch pedal. It started smoking. Fortunately, I pulled over quickly and saw the wire smoking. I was able to move the wire off the clutch pedal and prevent it from getting worse. That was when I realized that when you work with wires, always do it properly with a soldering gun. That and carry a fire extinguisher just in case. Lesson 17. I learned the hard way that a cheap Porsche can be expensive. I purchased my first few after a quick test drive, not looking fully into the car. I was excited to get a Porsche, but there were some maintenance issues that quickly came up that I didn't have any idea would happen ahead of time. With my Porsche 944, it wasn't too long after purchasing it that I needed to change the clutch and clutch slave cylinder. These are things that a pre-purchase inspection would likely bring up as a potential problem. Paying for a pre-purchase inspection may cost a few $100s, but it could save you money on future repairs by avoiding a car with potential issues. Lesson 18. When I was shopping for my third Porsche, I ended up purchasing a Boxster instead of a 911. I was looking at some 996 and 997 generation Porsche 911s, but in the part of California's Central Coast where I was living at the time, all I could find were Tiptronic equipped cars. At the time, I was a manual transmission snob and went for the Boxster largely for being able to row my own. A few years later, knee issues that were aggravated by using the clutch led me to rethink trying the Tiptronic. I had already driven a few different Porsches with a PDK transmission, and that is a much faster shifting transmission. But having lived with the Tiptronic for over 3 years, it does get kind of a bad rap. It's actually pretty good, especially when you consider other options of its time period. Lesson 19. Have you ever decided to save money and later realized it wasn't worth it? When I had my Porsche Boxster, I needed to get new tires. And when I looked at the price of the Michelin tires, I instantly started looking for other options. I mean, tires are tires, right? Well, I thought I had done well until after some spirited driving in a car with Michelin Sport pilots. And the difference was night and day. So with your Porsche, don't skimp on tires. Lesson 20.
Driving a Porsche is all about the driving experience.
The feel of the steering, the sense of speed, even at legal speeds, makes a Porsche, well, a Porsche. The problem is, if you don't buy a Porsche with the sports exhaust option, the sound will be too quiet unless you are really revving it out. Putting in a sportier exhaust option makes the driving experience what you dreamed it would be. So when you look to purchase a Porsche, make sure to budget for a performance exhaust. That is, if a sports exhaust isn't already on that particular Porsche. You can thank me later.
The thing is, there are often hidden costs to owning a Porsche. So check out this video about the hidden costs of owning a used Porsche, Boxster, or Cayman.